I want to welcome you. Thank you for attending here. Today I want to share some experience we gained in the last big project, which happily gone live a bit more than 2 weeks ago. And some of you might have attended at a speech of my colleague Chris. He did some slightly advertising. And he shared the experiences we gained in this project with Elasticsearch and using the Liferay API. And what I want to do now is to draw the complete picture of the project. So basically, as it's written here, the task was to transform a digital web presence of the customer based on an old custom-made CMS to the next level to Liferay DXP. Basically, the cause was the customer has a bigger vision for his platform, for his presence in the web. The old CMS is basically just static content, and he wanted to move to the next level, first by migrating to Liferay DXP to get a modern platform, and then starting from this on in separate steps, moving forward, bringing in personalization and custom newsletters and stuff like that, all you can do with Liferay. And as I said, I want to draw the complete picture, and I will show some slide code pieces here because we are at the developer conference, right? But I will mainly focus on the major problems we had and the thinkings we made, how to solve them. But at first, I want to say something about our customer and the project itself, because I think it's a very interesting customer and it's an unusual customer. It's a big NGO named after the first German chancellor, Konrad Adenauer. And this foundation has a big web presence with many, many bureaus and offices in all over the world. And what they do with their web presence, they publish content on their website. They publish a lot of content. They publish regularly magazines and statements to what's happening in the world and in every part of the world. And they also host a lot of events. Really, I think every day they host, I don't know, nearly in every office they have an event every day. So they really publishing many, many contents on their website. And this is the main focus. This is a really content-oriented customer. So it's a perfect example for and content-producing customer. And as you have seen, just some numbers here, we had over 150 microsites. For every foreign office want to have their own presence. They want to, slightly different from the other offices and present their stuff. And that's of course why we had the 35 languages. And as we heard in the talk of my colleague, we had some issues with that and Elasticsearch. Due to migration, we migrated over 7,200 Liferay pages, layouts, and more than 200,000 web contents. And as you see, the numbers are really impressive, but what I want to highlight is this 1,000 hits per minute. We were calculating before, and we were thinking that we get maybe 25 accesses per minute. And as the system was going live, we constantly had 1,000 hits. So I think it's really impressive, and the system worked very good. It did not crash. And we were very surprised that it worked really good. But one thing I want to say on beforehand, what I've heard at the unconference, all the people here had nearly the same problems. Everything what was told there, we faced in our project. And if we had started a project now with DXP 7.1, many of the problems were gone. So we are seeing really a good process, and the portal is improving very much. And I think in the future this will help us a lot making future projects. And one thing to our project setup, we had the project runtime was about 10, 11 months. And we had a strong separation between the front-end development and the back-end development. And the whole project started with workshops with the customer to figure out what he really wants in his website, how it should look like, what the colors have to be, and stuff like that. And then we had a team who analyzed the old website and figured out what elements can be reused or what are the basic elements. And based on that, we started doing the backend and the front end, and I will show you what problems came up with this approach. But first, some specs about the project. We really had to stick to the standard. The customer wanted us to, notice him about every deviation from the standard because he wanted a system that is easily upgradable. He did not want to go back to the old times where the old CMS, they wanted to change just a slightly thing, add a new field to an input form for the content creators. It took, I don't know, 10, 20 person days to implement it, and everything had to be implemented by the old firm who produced this content management system. So he wanted to stick to the standard. Then another very important point, he wanted that all pages which are now available in the Google index are still available after we switched. Because the Liferay friendly URLs are slightly different from other CMS, of course, yeah. And so we had to keep in mind that the old URLs have to work in the new version too, because they had a really, really good Google ranking and they did not want to lose that. Another important point, the languages. So in Liferay Standard, the localization is based on countries. And that was a problem because the customer did not want to base it on countries, but on languages. And as I said, it was a very content-oriented customer. And beneath our project, we had some other projects at the same customer where we had some intersections. And yeah, it was a really tricky project. But these requirements were, not the worst one. The worst one was the fixed deadline of October 26th. So as you can imagine, it put a little pressure, especially in the last 2 months to us, but happily we managed it. And what were the key problems we faced? I've written them down here, and I want to share our thinkings about them and what we did. So at first, information architecture, how to model our business objects we have there and how to model relations between them. Then the next important step is how do we get those stuff from the old to the new world? And another important point, how can the infrastructure support us within the migration? And I want to say some words about the interface, the front end, because basically this is what the customer will see at the end. So for him, it's the most important point. From a backend view, we had some more major issues. And one thing, we had to keep in mind, as I said, the customer is very content-oriented and he's not very IT-affine. They produce content and they want just to have their systems working. So we had one workshop with the customer to get an idea how the content creators are producing content now. And within the process of the migration, we had a lot of questions to the customer, and we asked the question, and we had some proposals for solutions. And every time we asked and said this might be the best solution for the problem, he said, okay, do it. So we tend to omit this process more and more. So we had a great responsibility because we decided in the end how the system will look like. So let's have a look at the information architecture. In the world of the customer, everything is content. So basically, this is what he used to be, and I will show you some major items of the new site. So on the left side, you see a typical publication on the website. So this is the new design. And on the right side, you see an displaying for an event. And as you can see, it's a lot of content, but what you also see, we have some related informations with it, which are made using different mechanisms. For example, up here you see, you might see there is standing country report, so it's a kind of meta information. Then you can see here is the contact person, which is also another content, and you can see here you have some related pictures and links to the document and media library, and also related links to other content. So what I want to show here, everything is content. And the question was for us, how can we model that? But before we could figure it out, we analyzed the old system. The basis was the database, the content creators interface, and the old website. Basically not more. The process from the old website to create actually the HTML files was scanning the database and then through somehow kind of magic, PHP or what else. They created static pages which were delivered to the Apache. So what we found out in our analyzation phase, everything is content and is heavily related with each other. We have a variety of meta information which were managed in the old system just using input forms, but within Liferay we have much more possibilities to manage that. And we have a lot of content sharing, means that informations are shared between those different 150 microsites. So this was also a bit tricky to move that into Liferay. And the customer was used to think in, I would say, databases. This means they have different content types, publications, persons, locations, everything like that. And for everything, they had an input form. So they are used to think in those elements. And we did not want to break this thinking, and so we decided that we stick to this approach, but we wanted to harmonize this. Imagine those publications I've shown you, they have 30 different kinds of publications, which basically differentiate through the panel up above, what I've shown you, through these country reports. So in the old systems, they had 30 input forms. And we were able to harmonize this, and yeah, at the end we had 3 input forms instead of 30. So for the content creators, this was much better, and it gave more overview. So finally, we thought about how could we model those entities. Should we use the asset framework because we have different business objects? But then we had the problem that we have to program a lot of ourselves. As shown here, we had to do, for example, multi-language and draft and expiration workflow, and we had to somehow relate it. And the cool thing with Liferay DXP is that you can relate content to content. And this was the key feature why we choose to stick to that. And for every kind of content type, we created a separate structure and connected them with each other using this new feature. And then we get all this stuff here out of the box. And we nearly had nothing to code, except one thing. If you connect web content to web content, you cannot limit the connection to a specific structure. So as you've seen in the publication, there's a related person, and you cannot limit in the standard this just to a person structure. So this was one point we had to add some custom logic, but the rest you get out of the box, and this worked perfectly. So if somebody asks you, should I use standard or do I want more flexibility, I would say the standard offers really, really much flexibility. So the next question, after we decided what or how to model our business object, was how do we get the data into this new structure? And another very important point is we want to do this repeatable, because as you can imagine, you don't program this in 2 weeks and then you get all the stuff from one to the other side. It is an incremental process, which took us, I guess, it was 8 months in the end. Yeah? So you making incremental steps, and you want this process to be repeatable. You want it to be automated. You don't want to do a lot of manual stuff within. And yeah, that was pretty challenging, because you just can't push the content from A to B. You need to do some stuff before. You need to create some structures. So this is reduced to this process, which is, yeah, very simple, shown here, but on the code side, it's a lot of work to do. First thing, data cleansing. So our basis for the migration was, as I said, the database. And as everybody knows who have made a migration project, there's always some crappy data within it that crashes your job. So we had to do some data cleansing, we had to do some enrichment, we had to add some custom stuff to ease the following migration. This was the first step. The next step I've shown here is the basic structures. So you at first had to create your group, your sites, your layouts. You have to create these structures. You have to create categories and stuff like that before you actually can start migrating content. And as at the unconference, we've heard there were many different approaches how to implement those site generators. And we also implemented a utility utility library to provide methods and classes which had done this for us. And I will show you one example, the structures, the web content structures. We did not want to import them using LAR or something like that because we had many structures. We had a lot of reusable items within those structures. As you can see here, this content element was in nearly every of our structures. So it's perfectly a reusable element. And I was investigating in the Liferay code if there exists something like that. There is an annotation-based feature, but it does not work. So we ended up doing it ourselves. So we have here, as you can see, an annotation, and on all fields we have annotations too, where we can provide several informations like the label in multi-language label, the connected structures, and it's the names of the fields, and you can easily see which structures are connected to each other. And the cool thing is that we can use this model for the later content migration to use it for validation, for example. So this is one thing we implemented amongst a lot of other stuff. So the next step, when we have the basic infrastructure, we're creating the actual, or we're migrating the actual content. There was a next problem. As I said, the content is heavily related. I want to give you an example. What we see here is an event. Yes, it's an event workshop. So what we see, here's a contact person connected. So as I said, everything is content, so the person is content itself. And as you can see, we have an event, we have the person has publications. Okay, now is the question where to start. With what structure do I begin my migration? Because obviously I can't begin with the event because it depends on the person. So we thought, okay, maybe we start with the person. But as you can see here, we have a department. Okay, the department structure has context. Okay, what to do now? So we're running in a circle. And the idea to solve this hen and egg problem was every content is responsible to resolve its relations. So this is declared here. Basically, the idea is that when an event, for example, is migrated and it has a person related, we look up in a mapping table, does this person already exist? If yes, we take this reference. If not, we create a so-called placeholder. So we just create a web content with the structure and not containing any information, just to have those placeholders, save it in the mapping table, so that it can be migrated in a later step. And so we got rid of those migration order. So it might be, it is a general approach, and it might apply to many problems you might have, even not in the Liferay universe. Yes, and another important point were the files. We also had to migrate the files. As you might remember, we had 280 gigabytes that were, I think, 215,000 separated files. So I guess it's a nice amount. And there we took the same approach. We did not migrate 280 gigabytes through the Liferay API. This would have taken, I don't know, a week, or I'm not sure if it worked at all. So the idea was there that we also create a placeholder file, which has all the meta information, but it's empty. Yeah? So what we did, we scanned at first the complete FTP server and all the files that are basically there from the old system, and they are connected in different ways to our contents. Some are directly connected to the database, some are just URLs within the content, and we scanned this whole thing and made a master table. In this master table, there were every meta information. Where is that file? How big is it? What's the name? What's the MIME type? Everything. And in the last step, we just had to copy the resulting file into the Liferay folder, because the cool thing in the Liferay document and media library is it has a strict structure. So you basically know from the database exactly where the file is, and this is a uniform way. So we could use this, and yeah, we were we were done, and we done this copy job using the Talent Studio for data integration. Some of you might know it. And this is a very powerful tool, and it helped us to reduce those file migration time for 280 gigs to 4 hours. So after 4 hours, all the files were in the correct place, and they could be displayed in the portal then. So the process I've shown you was automated using shell scripts. So we did not have to do anything. So the cool thing about the process is I just click on run migration, and it starts migrating and starts creating my group, my company, layouts, basic folders, the structures, everything like that. There's no manual interaction. And this leads us to the third one. How could the infrastructure stack support the automation? Because I said we had to migrate a lot of times before we can do the final migration and have the final system, we have a lot of iterations to do. And how can the stack support us with that? Really early in the project phase, we thought about how could we solve that. And we began, okay, maybe let's use a local setup. But if you think of, you have to migrate every time, and at some certain point, you crash your portal completely. You have to delete the database, or you have to drop and recreate. You have to delete your temp folders and stuff. And it's a lot of manual interaction, so no way. Next thing, we thought we might use a virtual machine. But the virtual machine is also too static, because we had regularly changes on the migration code itself, on the configurations, on the dependencies. We got every 4 weeks a new database snapshot from the old system. So we had to renew the virtual machine image for every developer. So this was also no solution. And then we thought about, okay, let's try Docker. We did not use Docker in Liferay projects before, so it was our first time using Docker, but it was the perfect choice, because it supports perfectly our migration setup. I can run everything in my Docker container, and if something crashes, I just throw them away, and I start up a new bunch and start from the beginning. And another cool feature is that every stage has the same lookout. You have the same containers and the same environment on every stage. So what we did, we had one for our developers, but we had on a central Jenkins environment, we had a testing environment, and we had a master. And the master was built every time somebody pushed a change to the migration logic. We used this to make sure that our migration logic is not broken or is breaking within the actual migration process. And up to now, to the project end, we had 1,200 successful builds in this master. And the third environment was our testing stage. There we put all the data from the old system, so that we had a completely new system on our Jenkins, which allowed our front-end team to develop at the final system. So this was really a cool feature. And the nice side effect, if a developer says, works on my machine, this is no excuse anymore, because every environment is the same. And yeah, it might be a quite nice feature or idea for other projects. Just a short slide to our setup, because there were some discussions at the unconference how to cut the containers into several layers, or how to actually persist some state. There were some discussions. What we did, we had 5 containers. You see here. The 2 databases, so the legacy database from the old CMS and the Liferay database. And we had some containers which compiled, for example, all our Maven projects, which contained the logic. And we had a Liferay container which persisted the OSGI state, so that we can shut down and warm up the server without losing our state. Because at some point you stop your work on one day, and on the next day you will go on, and you won't wait to until your local migration is finished. So it was also a good idea to just separate those volumes, that you have them on your local machine and you can persist your state. Yeah. And one important point, I did not write it down here. We also had a container which built our theme using NPM and all the stuff. And if you're using a Windows machine, it can be a mess with all those millions of files which are transferred in some weird folders. For us, from the backend point of view, yeah, it's somehow magic. And all this was abstracted in one container. Just click build theme, and then it's deployed. So perfectly abstracted. Okay, let us come to the last point. What about the front end? We had a lot of discussions how to actually build the front end. And as I said at the beginning, our concept team figured out that there are many elements which are reusable. So we used these informations or this outcome, and we generated a couple of ADTs, application display templates, which are responsible to render certain kinds of logic. I will show you an example. These are two typical layouts of the current page. The left one is a kind of an overview layout, and on the right side you see a detail layout. And on every layout you have a certain amount of portlets which basically render different informations in the same way. So our idea was to abstract this whole stuff and hide logic in a macro library. So basically, the free marker templates, the actual ADTs, just contained what label to display, but they did not contain some kind of null checking or, yeah, if the stuff is not there, use and default. This was all abstracted in this macro library. And as some of you who attended to the talk of my colleague might heard, we had this magical front-end service. Actually, the free marker templates made one call, and they got the actual journal article to render back, put it into this macro library, and then it was displayed using the free marker templates. Why did we do this? We wanted to have reusability, so the free marker templates are very tiny, I would say, because if we had those logic from the macro library in the free marker templates, this would blow up everything. And so with that, it's a lot more maintainable, and we were able to hide all the value checks within here, within small macros, which are really, really good, maintainable. So to come to an end, what should you, or what do I want to give you as key takeaway? We really struggled with the information architecture because Liferay offers you a lot of ways to model your business objects and to model your relations. So I recommend take your time, investigate, do some POCs, and then examine what is the best solution for you, what is a sustainable solution. Because as I said, the project is going on in further steps. And if you crashed it from the start, you will, yeah, you know, you will have a lot of more effort to fix this in later stages. And the next, utilize the toolbox Liferay offers you. You have, through the OSGI implementation at DXP, a lot of more flexibility. You can hook in at nearly every point without crashing standard functionality. Use this. Also use the flexibility web content displays and application displays offer you. We've heard that we should not have much business code in the application display templates. This was one of the outcomes from the unconference. I would say this is not true at all, because the stuff that is displayed, for example, simple example, if the picture is not there, display a default picture. This is not something that has to be done in code. This can be done in an application display template, because at the end it is displaying, it is a user interface, and it has to be there. And also consider Liferay offers you a lot, but you need to, at some certain point, you have some potential for optimizations. Think of caching of contents, or using or extending the Liferay search to build up complex queries you have to when you might display different contents. So use the Liferay toolbox, It will help you a lot. So, you made it. Thank you for your attention.